because of cattle farming, Northern Europeans, actually there's 4 spots on the global map developed almost the same time, about 200, 300 years next to each other. So they independently developed this mutation so they could digest milk sugar, because that gives these people 60 to 70% of an advantage of surviving the environment.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside. Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Instagram Story himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going, man? You have been all over the Instagram stories lately. Multi-story, back-to-back. It's been a lot.
Well, I got to give people what they want, and people are responding well to the Instagram stories. So if you guys, want to see what's going down on Instagram, you can follow me at J Klaus.
Do you use a filter or makeup or something? Because the lighting looks like you're wearing makeup.
Two things. I do often put on one of the filters, usually like a pretty low level one. Second thing is, I think my cheeks are just generally rosy. Yeah, I think I'm kind of red in the face.
Really, red in the face, long in the tooth. I don't know. That's all I got. I don't have any other more in this.
Eric, my friend, how is your weekend going?
My weekend is being consistently interrupted by my full-time job, so it's going. It's pretty much the week.
Yeah. We're on a podcast blitz this weekend. There is no weekend
we are
for
on
us.
A podcast. You put a hold on my calendar for 2 full all-day events, just in all caps, podcast blitz. So that's what kind of weekend we're having.
Production schedules are hard, man. We got to do what we got to do to give the people what they need, and that is a weekly episode of Upside, where we are talking to founders outside of Silicon Valley.
Man, that was good.
Good segue, right? Eric and I both believe that it's a great time to be a founder outside of Silicon Valley. And so every week we're here on Upside talking to those founders, people who we believe are building scalable companies with upside, people who are intelligent, capital efficient, and have identified opportunities that sometimes are geographic advantages to being outside of Silicon Valley. Eric, you want to talk about the format of our podcast a little bit?
Yeah, so we do our podcast in a 3-part format. First, Jay and I talk through some independent research we do about the founder and the company and the opportunity. Then we dive into an interview where we examine those 3 things again, but with the founder's answers and our questions. And finally, we go into what is Jay and I's favorite part of our podcast, the deal memo. The deal memo is as Jay makes pointy gun excitement. What would you even call that?
That's my pew, pew, pew motion.
Yeah. So that's where we shoot our shot, and we take our understanding of the opportunity of the founder of the company, and we put it into context as if we were angel investors looking to invest in this company. We make some comments about the things that we talk about, some areas that we have concern, some areas that we see a lot of upside, and wrap up with what we want to see from the company in the next 6 to 18 months.
And that third section of our show is where we want to hear the most from you guys. So as you're listening through this, as you guys have thoughts about this company, this opportunity, we'd love to hear what you agree with in terms of our analysis, what you disagree with, what we're missing. And you can communicate with us on Twitter at UpsideFM or on our preferred podcasting platform, Breaker. You can comment directly on the episode in real time to where you're listening and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you, and this way we can both get smarter. Today, we're talking with Sherry Zhang, founder and CEO of GenoPalate. Sherry has a PhD in molecular biology from Marquette University and has used DNA technologies to understand obesity and metabolic disorders in the past, which leads into GenoPalate. GenoPalate analyzes individuals' genetic data, demographic, and lifestyle information to deliver personalized insights for optimal healthy eating via DNA-based profiling. Basically, GenoPalate's DNA analysis gives customers genetic-based recommendations for foods that are scientifically best for their diet.
And I just want to start thinking about this in the context of how big the market opportunity is here. We've seen 23andMe, we've seen Ancestry.com. There's a few others out there in the gene sequencing, gene reviewing, gene testing space.
Genetic health testing.
Yeah, but it's such a huge space. I have that it's going to be $22 billion by 2022 is a number I found. And I think that comes down to a simple thing is that everyone has genes and no one understands what theirs are. So there's such a ubiquitous demand for this.
I'm glad you found some market size data because I struggled to find that. I did find that Helix, which is a competitor to 23andMe, raised $200 million recently. So I assumed it was a fairly large market. I want to get a couple things from you, Eric, because I know you have a couple opinions on this, but real quick, wanted to say GenoPalate was founded in 2016 and is based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They are an alum of Generator, the Generator Accelerator, who led their seed round funding of $307,000. So something that you and I talked about off air, Eric, was that you were afraid of DNA testing or testing your DNA. And I would love to hear you speak about that.
So I'm not afraid of the idea of getting my genes tested or getting the output of what my genes say. It's more of a privacy concern to me. Like your digital privacy, I get that you put it out on the internet. It's your name, your information, whatever. You can always change that. You can mix it up. The data can be hard to find. Yes, your social security number is probably one that you don't want stolen, but the idea that that information can go out there is less of a concern to me than the idea of your genes themselves and the thing that makes up you and your being readily accessible by anyone in the event of a hack. So we've seen that there's not many companies that haven't been hacked, even the ones with best in class security. And if your genes get hacked and there's a high enough number of things and someone finds out a way that they can do some sort of crazy serum or whatever the terrorist attack that you want to, the soup du jour of terrorist attack or whatever, it's just like, that's just like too much for me to have a direct impact on me biologically. So I have stayed away from doing any of the 23andMe's or the Ancestry.coms or anything like that because I've seen on the fraud and investigation side of things what has happened to digital information, and I'm sure it will happen to biological.
I like that the true crime novel playing out in your head involves a serum as opposed to like an airborne toxin or something like that. It's a serum.
Yeah, serum's just like a fun, like villainous word, I think.
I was watching, actually it was a video game someone was playing. It was a Batman video game. And the enemy in this video game had prepared an antidote for the toxin that he had created. And I always thought, why, if this is his plan to poison people, why even have an antidote?
Because it's not fun if you're all automatically going to win the game.
Right, I guess.
You don't play football because you know you're going to win.
All right, yeah, I guess that's consistent with villains in all movies. Yeah. James Bond.
Back to privacy concerns. I just have a general privacy concern around this entire area, and I don't think that our global legislation is where it needs to be to address those kind of privacy concerns. I don't think our security is where it needs to be, and I think that there needs to be more work done before I feel comfortable giving away what is effectively the code to write Eric to the internet.
The interesting thing here about GenoPalate is we're not looking just directly at the DNA assessment market here. We're also looking at things like nutrition markets, because I think the premise of GenoPalate is we're going to help you eat better based on your genetics, not so much as we're going to give you genetics, and because of that, you can eat better.
And according to Ibis World, the size for the dietitian market, which is, I believe, what they're trying to be, is $10 billion in 2018 revenues. So when we think about the market size of this opportunity, it's somewhere probably between the 10 billion and 22 billion. Maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe there's some synergies that both of them grow because of it, but it's a big market. I think that's what we can come down to. Everyone has genes. The dietitian market's big. The gene testing market is growing and big. What we take away from the market sizing exercise here is that the opportunity here is massive. Everyone eats food. Everyone has genes.
All right. You ready to talk to Sherry?
Let's do it. Whoa. Here we are. One more thing. Jay, is there something you want to tell the people?
I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is I've started to invest more into the podcast in the form of a new laptop. The bad news is because of this investment, I did not reset my audio settings. And so this interview may sound a little different because I screwed up. I messed up some of the audio settings and we had to do some extra editing to fix it. And you'll still hear some artifacts of key clicking in the background, which I apologize for. But Here in a couple weeks, once we get rolling recording again, that will no longer be an issue. So thank you for bearing with us, and we apologize for any inconvenience. Okay, on to the interview.
Sherry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you here. You, I believe, are our first founder of Chinese background, so that's exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Sherry?
Good question. I grew up in a big metropolitan city called Tianjin. Last time I checked, they have 15 million people now. Haven't gone back for a year now. I really miss there. Boston remind me of my hometown a lot, so that gives you kind of a comparable if you haven't visited my hometown. It's one of the biggest cities near capital Beijing. You hop on the city train, 30 minutes, boom, you're there. So very laid back, a lot of great seafood, just very livable. I grew up there up to the point where I got my bachelor's degree in microbiology. Then I was looking for, before I graduated, I was looking for the best path to pursue my scientific career. I always want to be a professor. And my mom said, oh, the USA is the best place to be. So go, off you go. So I applied for several schools. And I got quite a few full scholarships. So the first one was from Marquette University in Milwaukee. And we weren't very familiar with the Milwaukee area, but the program has a very strong biology program, so we really liked the faculty. So I accepted it. And then the following other offers, I just have to turn down. And it turned out to be a very exciting journey to me. It's very cold in the first year, but I call it my home now. I'm a citizen of the USA. Unfortunately, my mother country doesn't allow dual citizenships. You probably know. So I have to give it up, unfortunately. But I love both countries. I think these two countries I happen to be involved in, they have the greatest people, very hardworking, very intelligent and innovative. So after I moved here to pursue my PhD in molecular biology at Marquette University, I graduated in 2007. And I got right away an opportunity to further my doctoral education training at the Medical College of Wisconsin, which is one of the strongest programs in town in Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. And I jumped from my PhD thesis was studying a plant system. It's very interesting. It's a weed. We call it Arabidopsis thaliana. Before without boring you with all the research I did there, I was very excited about what I did, where we study food aggregation because the plants cannot get away from their problems. They have to be sessile. So they develop a big array of molecular mechanisms to deal with the problems they have. One is cold. So that's kind of my background. My background in molecular biology at Marquette gave me a very strong foundation to study molecules, whether it's from the gene to the RNA or to the protein, the functional entity. How do we approach it so we can understand the mechanism, how things work? So that gave me we do single gene cloning. It's a long, lengthy, lot of work getting study one gene, one function at a time. But I think that's very helpful for me to build my further career on that. And then once I jumped into human genomics at the Medical College of Wisconsin, that's the postdoctoral opportunity available to me. I was just fascinated by all of a sudden I can study the whole genome of human, from a small weed for ourselves. That to me is really great. Long story short, I spent 11 years studying obesity and something called the metabolic syndrome. So that's a more complex model than just putting a few or 10 pounds on our body. It's more the central obesity, hypertension, dyslipidemia, pre-diabetic status, all these metabolic conditions that put people at 2 to 3 folds more risky for developing cardiovascular disease. So I was studying that using state-of-art genomics epigenetic approach. And we do have certain collaboration with proteomics, which is interrogating all the proteins in our cell. So it's a great place to develop my capacity as a scientist. And even though now I'm not in a position as an academic faculty member, but my identity will always be a researcher and a scientist. And I can do, I think, even greater science inside of GenoPalate, which is exciting.
I actually wanted to take us back to China for a minute. You went to Nankai University, right? In Tianjin?
Yeah, thank you.
Which is a really prestigious, very great university. So a lot of our listeners are from Western cultures and might not be familiar with the Gaokao and that process. I would just be curious to hear like your experience going through that and getting into university so we can contrast that with maybe what we experience here in the West.
Well, I think in my generation, China has been very modernized for education and culture and economy, as people know. When I came here, there's not much culture shock in terms of academic environment. It's pretty much similar. I think everything comes down to we came into science, arts or science, in particular technology, because we are, at least I was a curious kid. I was just a curious person, and I'm still curious. I want to know why, and I want to know why not. Right? So that applied to people globally. And I think whether people at Harvard, Marquette, or at Nankai, or the China MIT is Beijing, and there's a local, not local in Beijing, there's another school. I think people are just intelligent kids will be the same, and a lot of foreigners actually go to my school to pursue their higher education. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
I was not aware of the inability to have dual citizenship as a Chinese citizen. Can you talk about that decision for you and why you made the decision to become an American citizen?
Well, very early on, I got my family established in Milwaukee. So that's actually the most reason, one of the driving force that I need to be in the same citizenship with my son. I have 11 years old. To me, it will be unfortunate if we kind of belong to two different citizenships. So that's kind of the main reason. It's not because I don't want to be Chinese on paper. I want to be more American. I think it's just I love both countries equally, and it's more a personal choice. I was disappointed I couldn't have dual because my friends from Canada, they can have dual. Be able to enjoy both the convenience and the support from both governments. But I do, if that helps, I mean, I just felt after I did that, I didn't lose any connection with China. As a matter of fact, I was invited back as a part-time engagement for a while, for 2 years, supported by my employment at MCW. We built one of the most prestigious program in Shanghai, where the government give tremendous amount of resources and support and talent and policy. And there's a lot of programs to just make sure people like foreigners like me, but have the native connection, can live there without, or travel back and forth without much problem and issues. So I think the country, my motherland, is just very welcome. Even I change my, citizenship. I think that speaks to how open-minded both of these two countries are. I think that will help our economy to build in the next, many years to come.
So you're studying at Marquette, and you're transitioning into doing genomics and epigenetic research. At what point did you start looking at this and thinking or seeing an opportunity in the dietetic space?
Good question. I think I started to see possibility where great companies like Ancestry.com, 23andMe started to use the technology happened to be daily applied in my lab that to help general public to have better understanding of the data sitting in their body all the time. And to me, it's a powerful thing. And to me, it's something I could also do. But I'm never, as an innovator by heart, I'm never interested in doing something people already done. If I be honest with you, that's a waste of resources and talent and time. There's so much more you can do. So I think I was doing some both from personal interest, like, I want my own nutrition plan. But I was searching for, this is back before, obviously you can tell I prepared for many years, and then 2 years ago we founded GenoPalate, but it's longer than that. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I was thinking, oh, what if we have a provider will, give me the information, help me eat better for my body, which I'm living in an environment totally alien to my body. As you both kind of are interested in asking about. And there were not any providers really out there that provide scientifically curated knowledge, information delivered to a way that I can utilize. I was like, okay, then how about I build it with my friends and colleagues, and we recruited a team and see whether we can do something about it. So it's filling a gap to help people to go a little bit further in the application world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm curious from your side, Sherry, where you got the interest in entrepreneurship. Was that something that was in your family, or how did you decide to say, okay, I want to start a company?
I would say it's in the genes. The spirit, I think, probably can root it 2,200 years ago. My mother's family has a long heritage, which we can track. Her last name is Yang. At the time, it was a very military family. So they were the warriors for the country. They actually fought hard for the country's safety and freedom. And to that spirit kind of kept alive. And until I see my mom is one of the strongest women I have ever known. She's an educator. So she, 40 years, spread her knowledge to her students. Her students are all over the world doing great deeds. And so I have the highest respect for teachers like her. I think that spirit is over there, and she's super creative, innovative. So when I was young, she always tell me, E, that's my given name. And she'll say, hey, let's make a customized shoes with the different patterns. And then now recently I see someone, on Shark Tank is doing the same thing. I was like, this is old. Things like that. So I was having a very creative environment thanks to my mother. My father, on the other hand, is a CEO and president for probably 3 to 4 enterprises owned by the state. And in my hometown is it's a harbor town. So there are lots of import-export transactions and business going on. And he's working for one of the big organizations. They have a lot of subsidiaries. So this is kind of even though I was interested in building my academic career, I was just a good kid, play piano early on, then transferred to more science and technology. But my family is filled with business talks and people and creation of ideas. I think the combination of that helped me. I think there's something in the genes that, we all have this spirit. I'm sure if I type your genes for entrepreneurial genotype, that probably will fall in there. And by the way, we probably one day will be interested in that behavioral stuff. The environment also, it's always an interplay between your genes and environment, right? Same thing for your food and your genes. That's exactly what we're doing. The interplay between the two can lead to different outcomes in your health and environment. So for your question, Jay, I think the opportunity I had in the past 3 to 4 years where I can apply some of my running project in an innovative way at the Medical College, Wisconsin, and apply that to build something from ground up for Shanghai, for China, and back here now with GenoPalate is all kind of tied together. I think that's really what I'm interested in doing for my whole life.
I want to get to GenoPalate in a second, but first, you've spent pretty much your entire life in academia, and now you're transitioning to the private space and actually creating and launching a company. What are some of the challenges or obstacles you've had to face in this first 2 years of pure transition?
I think shifting the identity or the application of the identities, I should say, was one of the hardest thing. And I questioning the fact that I'm shifting to doing business completely in the face. Is it kind of like abandoning on something I really truly devoted, truly love for the whole life? Science, life, human, and animals and all this. And it bothers me for a while until one day I figured out doing the business, applying my knowledge to help people, potentially more people in real life, is actually exactly what my academic preparation should be for. So because of that, I think I feel stronger. But the transition wasn't easy.
So what is GenoPalate today, in your own words?
GenoPalate is a personal nutrition information company that helps people align their eating habits according to our readout, which is a scientifically curated information based on their genetic makeup. In short, we say GenoPalate helps people eat for their genes.
And is this something you mentioned that it was kind of in the works for a couple of years before it was available? Is this something that you were testing yourself with your own genes and your own diet for a while?
Yeah, it's easy for me to look up certain variants between you and me, which we differ about 5 million to 10 million of those, like letters of ATGC. Some of them are probably to do with your obesity, cardiovascular, all the way to Alzheimer's that 23andMe and other companies are focused on. But others are nutrition. How do you interplay with the nutrients you take in from your food? And how does that play a role in lowering your risk for the better health, optimal health? So that's kind of where I was most interested. So I was, checking, kind of testing some models, whether we have a robust enough algorithm where we could offer, not just for me, for my curiosity as a scientist who knows how to do this quickly in a raw way, but also apply it to the general public. My son is a customer. All my friends are, people like you and that I care about. How could I confidently call them and provide it? And at the end of this testing and trials, and not just me and with my PhD colleagues and scientists, friends, and believe that we can. This is a ongoing. GenoPalate will always be innovating, just like any other genetic companies or related biological tech companies. So we will not say this is the final product, and it shouldn't be. It should be a basic foundation for us to understand your genome based on 30 years of studies and trillions of dollars invested in this from the government. Now let's build on that around with our understanding of your true habits, your personal preferences, your behaviorals, and so on. So over time, we should be able to provide a more precise, more accurate personal nutrition.
So over time, as the sample size gets larger, the error terms are going to get smaller, things are going to become more precise. Where are we at in this technology now, whether that's at GenoPalate or at 23andMe or wherever the technology is? Is it 60% accurate? Is it 80% accurate? Is it 95% accurate? How would I understand the kind of prediction methodology?
I would say more than 95% accurate for the part we read. Right? Everything all the way to 100%. I mean, when I read, so if Jay shared his data, or very happy to take yours as well. That's ATGC, whatever we read for you for the genetic markers that we know works in certain mechanism in the brain health or gut health and so on and so forth. That's hard-coded. That's you thanks to your ancestors and bringing about into you after 2.5 millions of evolution, really. So that's done. The part that I said we need to keep innovating is to adding more layers to that, more complexity. Maybe 2 years from now, we will have certain more markers around eating behavioral, which is just emerging. We do have some very robust coverage on that already. I think it's the habits, habitual part that will make it more accurate to you, because you are just like one of our hundreds and thousands people who will be interested in using our service. We don't have the access to their life, and even though we want that, but what we know is to read their genetic material that is set in stone, sort of.
What are some of the common trends or themes you see with people as it relates to diet that they are messing up, right? Like what do people just commonly do that disagrees with their genetic makeup?
Binge eating based on, so we have a group of eating behavioral variants, we call SNPs, that can categorize people or subgroup people into different risk groups. If you are exposed to fatty foods, if you overeat, that'll push you to more extreme situation of developing obesity and all the associated metabolic syndrome. But that's all intertwined with how you approach your eating behavior. That's one example. Or someone has, this is another very interesting model where we have a genotype. It's relatively rare, but 1 out of 100 there are such individuals that will show the symptoms. Somehow the tribes this gene pool was originated from have 4 times higher efficiency of absorbing iron from the food. Now, in the modern time where everything is in surplus and in abundance, that could be a problem where, for example, some people train for triathlons are pushed to the performance point where, every day is spinach, a lot of healthy food, and a lot of red meats, and very high content of iron. And this person can literally have pigmented skin because they just have so much iron saturated in their body, they cannot pump it out efficiently. And that can be a devastating situation. So that's the kind of extreme case where the nutrient, which can be very healthy or helpful for supplementing our diet, and can be detrimental for other people if the genotype is unknown.
So you mentioned ancient tribes, and I'm guessing that the people who have this gene were in an area that was pretty iron deficient. Is that something that you kind of see as a large trend where what's grown organically near where someone's genes originated? So if you have someone who's Asian, for example, maybe dairy just isn't a very good thing and doesn't sit well with them, or someone who is from Italy can deal with a lot excess amount of fiber or something like that. Is that are those correlations prevalent, or is that more just like of a narrative fallacy?
Some of the evidence is pretty substantial. That's a good example you just gave. So my genotype for lactose intolerance is actually shown from my Asian genes. I'm intolerant for digesting lactose, the milk sugar, versus a lot of our Caucasian members are not intolerant. They have it's a mutation they developed about 3,000 years into cattle farming. So the original, we call wild type, are the fact that we don't have that because it's not the efficient way of keep a gene on all the time while you don't use it. And this is a very smart mechanism we developed in our genome. So after winning, meaning 5 years and above, you don't need to lactate anymore, and the gene will turn off automatically. That's applied to everybody in humans. But because of cattle farming, Northern Europeans, actually there's 4 spots on the global map developed almost the same time, about 200, 300 years next to each other. So they independently developed this mutation so they could digest milk sugar, because that gives these people 60 to 70% of an advantage of surviving the environment. Yeah, that's actually one of the basic mechanism that we infer our ancestral in the nutrition for our users.
And I kind of want to adjust real quick to go back to GenoPalate and talk about it operationally. How does this work? You sent Jay a box. He has a box. Somehow something goes in that box, and all of a sudden he gets a response. What happens in the interim? Does it go to a lab? Do you guys have a lab? Can you just walk us through that process?
Sure. So Jay got a box. In the box, there is a FDA cleared saliva sample collector. And they spend some 30 minutes on that, provide the saliva, so he needs to spit in the tube and then ship it. And days later, our lab will receive it. You have a contracted lab, which is a clear lab. They will group all the samples that belong to our project in this particular batch and then put it on a machine and a process, extract the DNA and put it on a big automated machine to process his DNA along with many other samples. And then it takes about a day or two before we'll be able to get the data. If, from the day that we extract successfully of his DNA and then with a good yield and put on the machine. And then we will receive the notification that his data is available for analysis. And we have an in-house algorithm built into our system, which is a HIPAA compliant environment, cloud-based. And then we will generate a personal nutrition report in about 4 to 6 weeks. That's kind of the industry norm from the day that you provide your DNA.
Is that algorithm protected in any way, or is it protectable?
It's protectable. We have a strategic plan for protecting our keep innovating IP. Right, it's a proprietary to GenoPalate, and then we keep updating as we go. Our algorithm not only interrogates curated scientific knowledge base we established in the genomics science, we also built in with an algorithm will take in the nutrition science and the food science and together. So at the end of the analysis pipeline, Jay will be able to get his own shopping food list that he can take it to any grocery stores or farmers market where he can shop for his own foods.
Jay, I really hope for your benefit that wasabi peas are on that list because Jay eats a lot of wasabi peas.
All right.
Noted.
This is maybe a little overblown. I've had wasabi peas a couple times on the podcast. Sherry, what's the feedback been so far from some of your customers at this point? And actually, before you answer that, when was this first available for the public?
We have a preview sales since January of 2017, but that's very limited to my local circle because we have a robust way of doing trials and getting feedback and innovating, polish our product and keep going like that. So it's an ongoing strategies. I would say the official initial launch was last fall this time. And the one you will be experiencing is actually our much enhanced release that we are very proud to take it to the world and let many people use it and be benefited from it. And I don't know whether you read the article about us from Journal Sentinel and USA Today also picked it up. And so far we've seen very good response from the public. So people are interested. That's a very good feedback we got initially that I want to share with you.
Has anybody been able, just trying to think of the timeline here, has there been enough time that's passed that somebody has taken the GenoPalate test, gotten their recommendations for diet, and has really implemented that? Have you seen a full cycle of that and gotten feedback from those customers?
We do. We are collecting more as we're innovating our pipeline. And the feedback are very positive in general, but it's very individualized, as you can tell. There's a commonality in how people use it, how people respond to that, and how that has impacted their nutrition life so far. But we are very encouraged, and we utilize that in feedback to refine our current release.
How many people have gone through and spit in the box so far?
The data I can release right now, if you can understand, is more than 500
Okay.
paid users. These people including whole family, 4 or 5 couples. So we are very interested in providing families with a household nutrition meal plans and solutions as well. My background was family-based population study, so that helps a lot.
And are people saying that it's helping them to lose weight or sleep better, or how do people say this makes a difference to them once they follow these guidelines?
I don't want to give partial data because I'm a data person. I want to give statistical significant data to you. But I do want to share with you the feedback from, again, individual data points include, I feel much energized after I adopted. This is the current offering. We expect to have much better enhanced experience from this point on. People have experienced more convenience of losing weight if that's their health goal. There's some people, they don't want to lose weight. They want to gain muscle mass. So we can also help with that with eating for your genes. That's what our hypothesis is. And there are people who have energy associated with better sleeping patterns. Overall, what we confidently provide to our users is a way of thinking and making choices for your foods. So we call it informed decision-making process we are facilitating. Whether you want to fit into that jeans 20 years ago that you purchased, or, going to a wedding 3 weeks from now, or you want to be more athletic and whatever it is, or deal with your work stress better in a better, stronger way. I think it's all up to the individual. Fundamentally, we provide a universal tool that is personalized to you at a very, very deep level that you could utilize when you're making so many choices in your daily life that you feel empowered with it. So that's the fundamental thing the value proposition we provide.
So in the intro, I mentioned that everyone has genes and everyone eats, which means that your tool, as you just called it, universal, is just that. It applies to everyone. So how do you identify who your first target audience is as you kind of develop? Who is going to be like that core group of users that allows that to eventually be universal?
From me, right? From a person who is curious about my body, regardless of education level or socioeconomic level, gender, age. Really, I think, as you said, it's a great way of saying about GenoPalate is everybody has a genome, everybody has to eat frequently, and everybody deserves a healthy outcome, a healthy life. And hopefully this will help them live happily and long. So I think it just all comes down. I want to, I think a lot of e-commerce, the first question is, we all go through that, right? Practices or exercise. What is your segmentation? All right. What's your target audience? And I don't want to say we're off target, or we don't want to say we're random, but I do think I see this differently. I see this, if it can be applied to me and you, and I believe that can be applied to many people who have the heart to adopt it.
And once this new version goes out, you've redone the website, you have this new version of the product. What is GenoPalate's strategy for going to market and getting in the hands of people and making sure people are aware that this is an option for them?
Through good people like you are, through users. I think the word of mouth for GenoPalate so far is very limited experience, is very powerful. I think I've seen people go to their Thanksgiving dinner, just say, hey, you should try this thing. This is unsolicited. I knew this after I actually reconnect with individually. And if it helps that individual will be our advocate. And we really want to foster that. I think the best way of fostering that is to provide a better service every day for that person we engage with. So it's about relationship. It's beyond one transaction.
Let's switch over to finance for a second. How does GenoPalate make money?
We have about 30% to 40% margin. So we have several products right now, if you can see it online. But the main products we're promoting is the two ways of getting your genome profile for your nutrition. One is going through the kits that Jay will be going through. The other way is also he can go through is submitting your existing data that was originally purposed for something else, but we can repurpose that at a lower cost compared to the kit. The kit is also affordable too, as you can see. So once we establish that personal nutrition profile, people already feedback that they want further nutrition planning services, meals, and so on and so forth. And then we will go around and provide that. So the margin on our services is about 30. That's just enough to help the house running and keep investing in getting more awareness out and keep building an innovation team.
So that 30-40% is gross margin then? It's before all the fixed costs? Or is that your net
Correct.
margin? That's okay, cool. So what are the KPIs that you guys look at GenoPalate? What are the numbers that you really care about and focus on if you had a dashboard?
Right now, I'm caring about quality first and quantity. What I mean is how we already have a dance club we established locally, mostly in Wisconsin and nationally too. We want to make sure 70% or more of these people are happy with us. If not, we want to know why. Why not? And we want to know how can we do to make it better. So that's the quality part. Quantity-wise, the good part, we want to spread it out. And through you, through me, through our family and friends, and through media, or Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth that commonly used. To me, it's about spreading out quality messaging, reflecting quality work. So I think that's kind of the top measurements on my matrix.
So you mentioned 70% or more are happy. Do you guys do follow-up surveys? Is that how you get that data?
We do to a certain degree.
Okay.
Without burdening our people with too many surveys.
And something that you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier is this idea of maybe having dietary plans or other additional add-on services. It seems that right now you're kind of there's no repeat customer because you only have one set of genomes, or one genome set, I guess. So once everything is checked in and run through the proprietary system, you kind of get your one report. What are the options for future add-on services or recurring services?
Right now, we're focusing on acquiring that first engagement.
Right.
Establish that profiles. So it's a little bit early to answer your question in a comprehensive way, as you can imagine. But right now, we know people are interested in getting something personalized for their convenience. Right. So we could utilize the established profile and give them products that they can use for daily applications, whether it's something tailored towards the differences in their household or, the parents and the children, and provide something in common so that they can use it, put it on the refrigerator and look at, this is my shopping list. And, we all share, if we eat the raspberries, right? And we all benefit from it, things like that. And we could do that. And then if people want to pay for it, and we'll provide that. And all the way to if people want to have diversified meal plan for them for extended period of time, we can also innovate our services and to provide that as well. So to me, that application of what we establish is an opportunity where we could upsell or re-engage our customers.
Talk to me about your team, Sherry. How big is your team right now?
We have about 16 to 17 team members. There's a lot of growth recently. So I think it's about 16 to 17, if I'm accurate on that. Some are part-time, some are full-time. Each member of this team brings to the team a complementary skill and skill set. And I'm very happy about how our team has been evolving. And we are constantly seeking talent. So if you guys know anybody who are passionate about health, nutrition, genomics, then let me know.
Listeners, that's a shout out to you as well.
And so those team members, can you break down what their different roles and skill sets are?
Sure. Without getting too much into nuances, we have 3 PhDs, me included, and these are experts' reputation in our industry, in the innovation sector for either genetics, genomics, or data analysis. We have 3 registered dietitians who have clinical experience and also are great scientists working with me in refining our algorithm and building our innovation core for nutrition science and food science. And the other 10 to 11 people are supporting, not saying downplay any of their roles, they're fantastic, but they're supporting our core scientist team or innovation team to make sure we are supported and we do the right thing. The house is running and also messaging this knowledge and the product to the layman audience, which is, I think, it's very important for our business.
That sounds like a lot of people to keep on staff. I think you guys just finished a small raise. Is that where the funding for this team comes from?
We're very efficient on capital to date, and we are proud of it, and we'll keep continue our culture of the capital utilization. We managed to have this team join and maintain and keep growing. And right now we are on a bigger size for the team because we have a few new interns join for the summer. And I think after the summer, we'll have some restructuring and we are recruiting more full-time people as well. But so far we manage well, and there's no one member that is not efficient on our team. So we're really proud of it.
So just trying to get an understanding here to follow up on Jay's question, you guys raised $300,000 in this last seed round, and you have what we'll call 10 full-time equivalents. You said that some people are part-time, some people are full-time, and you're 16 to 17. So that's like $30,000 a year per person. Are people foregoing salaries here, or is this how does the overhead cost work of people? I think is the question, and how does that translate into runway?
We have raised a little bit more than 300.
Oh, okay, so then we're off there.
Information, the details I wouldn't be able to disclose because we are in a process of evaluating our financing needs and everything. But what I can say is, yeah, that's our team. We have been successfully maintaining it and doing a great job. And I don't think it's, I can speak for other companies, but it works.
Cool.
I'm curious about being based in Milwaukee. Obviously, you went to Marquette, and that has a large reason why you started the company in Milwaukee. How has living there either benefited the company, or basically what I'm trying to get to is there a geographical advantage to being in Milwaukee, or is that sort of happenstance?
Good question. So I just want to clarify, Marquette is not the reason I founded it here. The reason was my core team happened to be here to begin with. And if one happened to be in Boston or the other one is in California, maybe the structure will be different. However, so far, we're delivering a information-intense business that we don't rely on physically to be limited by any geographic location. So that's just the trait of characteristics of the company forever. So I think it doesn't have to be anywhere. And then that's also an advantage that some of my people are not located in Milwaukee, but still contributing tremendously to the work. So we were really can be very virtual capacity. It just happened to be me in Milwaukee and some other people near here. For your question about advantages or disadvantages, So far, I think I see more advantages versus not else is because Milwaukee and Wisconsin, in terms of the startups and the entrepreneurial environment, is underrated. We got a lot of support from the local ecosystem. You're probably familiar with this Generator Accelerator program. And we graduated from G-Beta, which is a precursor program. We built a little bit more after that, and now we got admitted into the regular program last fall, and we built tremendously more during that and after. And since then, the state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee and people here are just very supportive of a startup like ours and trying to help people eat better and for better health. And I feel the resource here for us, I can't speak to any other entity, is pretty good.
Have you ever had an output that said that you should eat more cheese curds? Because I feel like that would go over really well in Milwaukee.
Not for me.
Not for you, but yeah.
Yeah, the German and the Irish ancestry. Yeah, that most of them, 90% of Northern European ancestry will have that mutation. Will help them to digest lactose. For
Good to know. How big is this opportunity? How big can GenoPalate get?
Well, I don't know how to answer that question because as the founder of a company, we all want this baby of ours to be huge one day. So I think it is everybody's dream. All I can say is I think by focusing on one relationship at a time, really treat people nicely with respect, with care, and that we are delivering, I think we can be big. And I just hope one day lots of people will know about us and have used our services and will talk about ours.
I have one more topic I want to hit before we wrap this up. So if you'll indulge me,
Sure.
It's the idea of privacy and the fact that the only thing that remains private is our DNA currently. Everything else is pretty much out there for people to take and see, your name, your email address, your social security number. But biological privacy is probably like the final frontier of privacy. So I'm curious how GenoPalate thinks about privacy.
This is a fast evolving industry because it's important, it's helpful, and it's a great opportunity as well for businesses like ours. So what I meant was we will probably see in the next 2 to 5 years a lot of new policies, regulations, laws will come out and in place. And as both users, scientists, and the founder of this genetic company who wants to help people with knowledge, I welcome all these evolution because eventually I am confident that we all will come into a situation or a state where we can have a mature protection strategy, plan, and regulation so that we will all feel protected in the same time while using services like GenoPalate, hopefully Ancestry and 23andMe and so on. So that's kind of my little bit forever vision or feeling for this on behalf of GenoPalate. Another thing is we always stay state of art and also trying to be ahead of the curve when it comes to the privacy of our users' DNA or any other personal information we have exposed to. And GenoPalate will never sell or trade your or my users' data to third parties. And I don't know whether you are aware of, there are companies doing such transaction. That's their business. I can't speak for that, but that's not GenoPalate's interest. GenoPalate's interest is to utilize that data back to the servicing, bettering the service of each individual. And I think there's a stronger value proposition there than make some side money out of it. We apply the highest standard at a time in the industry for both the lab part all the way to how we handle the data management analysis. And again, as a user, each of us can always opt in, opt out at any time, the access that you give it to us as individuals. So that's kind of where we are standing at, and we'll be always investing resources, team, and time into the privacy issues of genetic data.
Great. Well, thanks for being on the show, Sherry. After the show, if listeners are interested in learning more about you or trying GenoPalate, where should they go?
If they want to try GenoPalate, go to our website. It's a brand new website. If you haven't experienced it, please do. You've probably seen the previous version, so please give us your feedback on the new one. Well, if someone like talent or potential partners or investors wants to get a hold of me, feel free to share my work email with them, and sherry@genopalate.com. I'm more than happy to be connected with them.
Great. Thanks again.
谢谢，再见。
再见。
All right, Eric, we just spoke with Sherry Zhang of GenoPalate. Time to get into our deal memo. Let's talk about GenoPalate as an opportunity here.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about the founder, let's talk about the company, and let's talk about the opportunity to see what are some areas where we see some upside, some areas where we have some shadows or some areas of caution. Let's dive in. What was your just initial kind of high-level take on the company and the opportunity?
So to me, this is a space that is growing, the sort of DNA understanding or DNA information space, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of players in that space as of recently. People seem to be into it. So I could totally see a world where GenoPalate is successful because you marry this idea of people being interested in their genes with people's interest in health and wellness that's growing and growing and growing. I think that's really interesting. I'm still a little hazy on how big this market specifically is. I'm a little hazy on who that target customer is. And I think Sherry did answer this pretty well. You know, we asked, who is your customer? Basically, because we led with the question of this could be applied to anybody. Who would you go with first? Her response was people like me, which she expanded on as people who are curious about their body and the best ways to live. I think that's a difficult market to put your finger on, and both in size and understanding who that person is, where to go and find them. So I have a lot of questions here, but conceptually, I like this as an opportunity.
Are you curious about your body?
I am.
That wouldn't be like how I categorize you. I think I know you pretty well, but that's something that's new to me.
I'm curious about all things. I signed up for GenoPalate. I spit in the tube.
That's true.
So, I'm curious. I want to know. I want to see what this experience is like. You voiced concerns over privacy, which I think are super valid. I kind of just expect that I have no privacy. So I feel like I've kind of surrendered that.
Fair. Let's just touch on the privacy aspect real quick, because I don't think it's definitely a valid concern. It's an area for caution. But the idea that it's HIPAA compliant, they don't sell your data, that's all great. I think that they're definitely making strides. It's just your data's in the cloud. Anything that exists in the cloud is hackable, regardless of how much great security you have. So I don't want to belabor the point of privacy. I think we talked about it enough on the upfront and in the actual interview. I just wanted to mention it as something that I would definitely be paying attention to as a potential downside risk for this company.
Totally. I think anything that is digital is in the cloud. Anything that exists really seems hackable at this point. We just survived a Facebook hack where 50 million accounts were compromised, and that goes all the way to anything you've authenticated with Facebook, which I have just no idea how to trace that back. I know that I was one of the accounts affected, but I've been hacked so many times the last few years, I really kind of glossed over this, and I should probably be way more concerned. It's just crazy what new realities we accept when things just continually go bad. But I won't get on that soapbox.
Well, hold up. Now I have one more point. I was going to cut it off, but you have been hacked digitally. Your genes have never been hacked.
Right. True.
Yet.
True.
That's a whole different thing. I think that when your genes get hacked, it's a whole different ball game than your digital identity.
So what do you see as the end game of that? What are the implications of genes getting hacked?
Oh, I don't want to go down the conspiracy theory route for like another half hour. But I just think that the science is definitely outpacing regulation and best practices in terms of being able to protect this stuff. And I don't know, I could hypothesize for hours about, both sides of the coin, the security side, how that's going to get better, whether that's some new type of technology like blockchain, and the hacking side, which is what happens when that actually goes down. Are they able to literally like somehow change your genes without you knowing because they have access to it? Is it just something that they can look up and figure out, okay, how can we monetize this? I'm not sure. Criminals are really creative.
That's true. People go to great lengths. I was just talking to somebody recently to hide health concerns or health realities for our president, for example. Went to Alaska a couple weeks ago, was speaking with our chef at that camp who had been a chef for President Obama when he visited Alaska. I was like, does he have a taster? Do they taste things? Because the night before, we had been trying to find out, does the president have a taster? Apparently, when the president is in foreign countries, sometimes they literally have to, like, if he uses the restroom, take that back to America to dispose of it so that they don't dig into it, find some health realities. Crazy stuff. Anyway, this is not related simply to GenoPalate. This is all things DNA that you're voicing concern over. So
right, absolutely. I also think that moving back into GenoPalate, there's this really interesting future casting that Sherry alluded to, which is like behavioral analyses and add-on services. And we'll dive more into the opportunity into the founder in a second. But this idea that this data set is very useful for teaching you what kind of food you should eat. Like, Eric, you shouldn't eat plums. Okay, fine, great. But it's also, if you run different algorithms on it, potentially extremely valuable for a slew of other things, which is what I think is fascinating.
You think that's some of the real upside here? Because I know in the interview, we discussed things like this is a one-time purchase as far as getting your gene set. You won't necessarily need to do that again. So you had the great question of what are the other add-ons or services? You're saying this is where you might be seeing some of the real upside in the opportunity.
I just think that once you have a data set of something, the algorithm you run on it, right now GenoPalate's algorithm is what it is. It's centered around food and centered around your body and what it's supposed to be eating or what it would like to eat the most. And there's add-on services around that product. There's add-on services that are probably like a personal nutrition plan or something more customized specifically to you, like weekly shopping lists that don't get boring, that come with recipes, things like that. But then there's also, based on that same data set, and I'm not saying GenoPalate has this idea or not, but she did allude to this idea of having some sort of behavioral component along with it. If you get enough data scientists who have the right, and she has 3 PhDs, so I'm assuming that there's the right brain power there. It just depends on the right subject matter expertise. You could write a different algorithm, which is a completely different product based on this same data set. So right now, the 23andMe's, the Ancestry.coms, the GenoPalates, anyone who's collecting this data, if they're collecting it in a clean fashion that someone can write an algorithm about, I think that the product range is massive.
Interesting. So you're almost looking at it from a platform play. They can provide the raw information and have other things built on top of it to leverage that information.
Right, which right now they won't do because they say they won't sell any of their data, but that gives you a little insight into probably what the 23andMe's and the Ancestry.coms or whoever's selling the data, she didn't allude to a specific name, but there's not that many people in the space right now are doing. So it's just like in the hedge fund space, if you have the best data set, you can find multiple algorithms to find a great winning trade or some alpha out of it, but you need the best data set. So I feel like that's kind of the underlying premise here is there's a race to the best data set.
I found it interesting that she spoke to the pure understanding your, I hope I use the right words here, understanding your genome, the ATGC, the Gattaca letters. That science is 95 up to 100% accurate right now. She says where the innovation is happening is that you can add on new behavioral layers, understanding habits based on genomics. And that's relatively new, she said, especially related to eating and food. So assuming that's true, GenoPalate seems to be in a good position at a good time. Something that seemed to be, well, I want to dig into Sherry as a founder because three of our questions we're trying to answer here relate to the founder of the company. Eric, you've spent a lot more time in China, so I would love to hear your take first about Sherry's background, coming to America, starting this. Is entrepreneurship something that you experienced a lot when you're in China? Is that something that seems to be a core family value? Pontificate a little bit, will you?
So one of the things I love about Chinese culture is it's just so long. I think they can trace a lot of things back to like 5,000, 7,000 years ago. The Chinese were a civilization when the Egyptians were a civilization, and Egypt is still a country, but China is like still attached to that same country. Obviously, there are rough patches, but the idea is that the culture is pretty fluid over the centuries, which is crazy. And I love the idea that when we asked, why entrepreneurship for you? She said, it's in my genes. They can trace it back thousands of years in the warrior class, and that's like the hardworking side of things. Her dad, it sounded like he was in the party, but he is a CEO of multiple companies. So you have the hardworking, you have the business. It just made sense. I loved all of that. I love that history and that it made sense over multiple generations. One thing that I thought was interesting was that she, as a founder, came from academia. This is only our second founder who really was steeped in academia. I mean, outside of your undergraduate curriculum, the other one being Mobius. And that is always an interesting challenge to me because I've the people who I know in academia don't generally have the same like tenacity about starting a business. And that might be an overgeneralization, but just from what I've seen, what I've experienced with professors who I knew were launching businesses on the side. We did some projects in school with professors who had their own kind of thing and would talk about it, but it just doesn't feel as like all in. And maybe that's just my perception of it. That was something that I was curious about, having been in academia for so long. And she opened up saying, my identity is an academic. That was interesting to me.
She mentioned explicitly that was a struggle for her too, to change that identity, to move into something and let go of something that had been so core to her. And she said she realized that the opportunity to take what she learned in academia and apply it in such a way that can affect so many more people was her real purpose. But I had that same sense, which was this a little bit of a struggle, which I think we can relate to. I think we can empathize with. What struck me as different from what we hear from a lot of our guests here in the West, when we asked her, where did the idea for GenoPalate come from? Why are you doing this? It seemed so much more calculated and opportunistic as opposed to necessarily a passion or something she like just had to do. It almost seemed like entrepreneurship is in my genes. I found myself studying this area in academia, and I could see that this was an industry that was growing and there was nobody here. And she used the phrase, so we were filling a gap.
See, I felt differently. She said one thing that kind of stuck with me, and it was the idea that if something isn't new, if something isn't being done that's new or innovative, it's quite frankly a waste of resources. To me, it didn't seem like she was filling a gap. It seemed like this was the extension of what she was doing in the lab, and what she was doing in the lab, like the natural evolution, the natural innovation, was to turn this out of the lab and actually do something new with the technology. So to me, it felt like, okay, she couldn't have done something as new and as big in the lab.
Interesting. Different reads. I like it. We need more conflict on this podcast.
Yeah, we had some good conflict last week, and I like that.
Healthy. Okay, so anything else that stood out to you from Sherry's background, or any shadows or upsides that you want to talk to for this opportunity?
I have a question for you. Venture capital has historically been like a boys' club, right? We've well documented the idea of a female founder being way less likely to raise venture capital. In almost any venture capital book you read, there will be some sentence in there that says you have to make sure you like the founder because you're getting into a relationship with them, effectively, that lasts longer than the average US marriage. The entire idea of bias permeates venture capital. And I think Arlen does a really good job of calling this out, especially for African Americans. But I'm curious as to if you've even thought about this. What, if any, impact did Sherry's ethnicity and accent have on your read of her as a founder? And I understand that that is a deep question, but I'm curious if you thought about it at all.
You're asking if I noticed any unconscious bias through the interview.
Yeah.
I will say that probably a little bit, and more so in trying to, I did find myself, just as I just said in that previous comment, right? I found myself comparing her answers to other founders on our show and almost comparing the way they answer things and the cues that I'm looking for Which is why I wanted you to start by talking about your experience with Chinese culture, because I really did have that feeling of, I don't know if this is something that Sherry is doing because it's distinctly Sherry and she has to do it, or because she saw an opportunity and wants to go after it. Because that was the read that I got. Either one could be successful, but early stage, going to be really hard. This seems like a particularly hard prospect because you're digging into life sciences and DNA with privacy concerns and in a market that's hard to kind of identify, and you have to figure out how to market this thing. I don't think I've felt unconscious bias from a gender standpoint to this point on the podcast, but I did feel a little bit of a cultural bias, I'll be honest.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and that's the important thing. We need to call that out, right? We're two in our 20s white guys. We are like the prototypical venture capital associate. And I don't think that gets called out enough. So I wanted to make sure that we made a point of it here on the podcast to say, look, we're trying our best. We're still flawed humans, but that's what we're doing. Also, I wanted to address one point on the idea of generalizing Chinese history, because she is an American citizen. She's lived what I can calculate about half of her life in America. So the idea of saying, okay, this is her as a Chinese person and we should put her in this context, or this is her as a Westerner and put her in this context, I think is a little difficult. And I think that there is probably so much that is rubbed off from American culture that having the underlying foundation of a Chinese like understanding of tradition and things like that is helpful, but it probably would be hurtful to over rely on that.
I'm glad you brought this up because there was one point about Sherry as a founder that I wanted to bring up. The fact that, well, one, I didn't realize that dual citizenship was not an option in China. And two, that she chose American citizenship to have the same citizenship as her son and to build this business here. I thought that was really compelling. And also just strikes me as a difficult decision, one with which I can't actually relate. I can try to empathize, but can't actually relate. And I just imagine that had to have been big. Yeah.
Would you, I mean, I don't know how tied you are to America, but I can't imagine like turning down my American citizenship. I would only go to a country where I can have dual. Like it just seems kind of crazy to me. But yeah, that's a big life decision. So let's pivot this conversation a bit. Let's get back to the opportunity. It's something you mentioned right at the beginning. You couldn't put your finger on how big this market is. So let's try to do a little bottoms up analysis here. I have a couple numbers in front of me. Let's make some assumptions. Let's figure out what the market size is.
Love it. Walk me through the numbers.
Okay. So let's just walk through what they've done so far, and then we can extrapolate from there. She said they've had more than 500 paid users. We'll just assume that's 500. They have a gross margin of 30%. So it's an operating margin of 30%. Price of a kit's $199. Price of DNA already is $99. Let's just call it $200. Let's say everyone signs up for a kit. That means that there is $100,000 of revenue in the business right now to date. $30,000 of operating profit, and we're not really sure what's below that bottom line to get us to net profit. So let's just stick with operating profit for now. How do we expand that? Like what would you say is an adoption rate of something like this? That's my biggest question right now is what percentage of people in the United States are going to say, oh, I want to learn how to eat better?
If you look at an adoption curve and you have the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, just as an industry, I think we're still in an early adoption phase for anything related to DNA testing, just out of like curiosity and not strictly medical procedures or reasons, right? So you're already looking, I think, at, I don't know, less than 20% of the population, maybe 10%. And that's for all the hard work that, things like 23andMe have done. And to relate it specifically to dietitian, probably smaller. What were you thinking?
Yeah, no, I think we're right in line. So let's say 10% of the US is like the total addressable market here in the United States, right? Let's not go across the world for now. So 10% of the United States is roughly 30 million people. 30 million people, and the average gross margin per person is $60. You're looking at a $1.8 billion opportunity. All that to say, that's a lot of assumptions, but it's a big market when you make conservative assumptions.
Yeah, and that's today, before it becomes more commonplace or even just more aware.
Right, absolutely. I think that the market is substantial enough for me to say, okay, this is something that I think people would be interested in. there's a huge trend right now towards organic, towards all these, there's always a diet trend going on, right? But there is maybe more of a clean eating trend than we've seen in the last 20 years, kind of really happening now. You see it with Amazon's purchase of Whole Foods. You see it with every single Heinz ketchup's coming out with something that's organic. Hellman's is coming out with something that's organic or like egg free or vegan. And all of these like classic products are now launching things that are clean, green, and I don't have anything that rhymes with the other two of those, but it would have been cool if I did. So I think this is a large opportunity. I'm excited about that part of it. Let's dive into the company itself, the vision for the company, and how it's going to address that market. And what did you see from that aspect that you liked?
I like that Sherry wasn't bullshitting us in any way, in that, we asked some questions that were tough questions about who is the customer, how are you going to do marketing? And she didn't say things like social media or, it seems clear to me that they're still identifying that. We've talked a couple times now about the interview with Ali Trutman and how much focus she's putting into her marketing channels and her marketing spend because she understands that just because she's the more mature company. Again, here, there need to be pilots that are run and understand how they acquire customers, who those customers are, what the segmentation is. So I did like that Sherry was, one, just looking from a psychographic level as opposed to a demographic level, saying it's for people who are curious about this type of thing, people like me. The question is, okay, tell me more about that person and where do you find them and how do you market to them?
Yeah, I like that. It was refreshing that we actually got a good amount of I don't knows or I don't want to make representations without like valid data. And that might just be that she's a data person. So like everything that she publishes has to be valid, peer reviewed. And maybe that's the academic in her coming out. I would have liked to have a little bit more insight. Let me step back. I think the reason we ask those questions isn't for the answer. I don't think the reason we say, okay, what's your total addressable market is so that someone can tell us 2 billion or 4 billion or 100 million or whatever it is. I think the reason we ask those questions, especially when it pertains to numbers or strategy or vision, is to see what the thought process is behind the answer. So when you get I don't knows or I don't want to make representations, but here's one small anecdote, it doesn't give me as much insight as I would like in that question to be able to say, okay, I understand how you're thinking about this. I understand that things are going to change, right? Your strategy is going to change. Your marketing strategy is going to change. But if you would have told me we're going to go and make a database of 1,000 Instagram models who like really care about their health and wellness, and we're going to start there with an influencer campaign. Like, even if that's like just something you're thinking about, or maybe you say we're thinking about doing it this way, that gives me a little bit more of a sense of like, okay, we're testing some things, we're trying some things, and here's some of the things we're thinking about versus, I don't know, we're looking at innovators like Jay, who's curious about his body, who's going to find us organically, or maybe we have some marketing message. But what is your take on my take there?
I agree with that. I wouldn't say it's an either or in terms of why we asked the question. I think it is a both. I think it's, we both want to know what information you have, but yes, also the thought process behind it. Sherry strikes me as a product visionary type of leader and not necessarily the operator or the marketer. And I hope that she has that type of skill set on her team. Very large team, by the way.
I would agree. And my question about foregoing salaries was because the math just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
If they made 300,000, or if they've raised 300,000, she said they raised more than that, so maybe they did. But call it 500,000, right? And they made $30,000 in operating profits last year. That's $53,000 an employee, roughly. Not a lot of money. Say she's foregoing salary, fine. The PhDs might be able to forego salary because they have teaching assignments, fine. Now you're down to 6. That makes a little bit more sense to me, $90,000 per person. But it's still just like, it seems like a large team, and maybe there's a lot of science going on in the background that we didn't really dig into enough on the podcast to understand what everyone is doing on that team. But to the extent that some of them are on the marketing side of things.
And she was counting interns that were part-time and may even be potentially paid for from other sources. Our intern is being paid for through the state of Ohio. And that just may be a little bit inflated and generous, but that did stick out to me too. All that to say, back to my original point, seems like Sherry has a great eye for product and what she wants the product to be able to achieve, I don't think that she's spent a lot of her focus yet talking or thinking through go-to-market.
I would agree. So let's run into our last question. Jay, when you're looking at GenoPalate in 6 to 18 months from now, what are you looking for?
I'm looking for more insight into that go-to-market, more insight into who their initial customer segment's going to be. I would love to hear some case studies, whether they're statistically significant or nearing statistically significant, to talk about here's what our users are saying after they've spent 6, 12 months using GenoPalate and changing their diet because of it, because that's still a little bit unclear to me. Yeah, I think I'll stick there. I think I want to see some more traction. I want to hear what the market is saying, and I want to have just some more clarity around all these things that we've mentioned. We've had some questions around.
I would agree. So I'm going to kind of splice my answer into 2 segments. The question is 6 to 18 months from now. I'm going to say at 6 months, I would want a lot of those questions you just asked answered. I would want a strategic marketing plan, whether it's written out or not. Just who is the target we're going after? How are we going to go after them? Why is this the right target? Give me those kind of like feels. What's the size of that target audience? How are we going to interact with them? Things like that. To answer the question, what is the KPI we're going to look at? Because she said there's 2 KPIs. There's quality, which is that 70% of the people are happy with their GenoPalate experience. Great. That's once they get on the platform. The other one is the quantity. And she said that's spreading the message of quality. So that isn't, to me, a measurable KPI at this point. And I think that marketing strategy, that marketing plan is going to buff out some of their initial KPIs. So that's at 6 months. At 18 months, I'm interested in 2 things. One, the number of paid users, because if you have your marketing strategy 12 months later, you should have some sort of increase, some sort of trend. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. And 2, are they hitting that 70% plus number of people being happy with their GenoPalate experience? It's the one KPI that came across super early, is that a great customer user experience is important for GenoPalate because you only have one chance at getting them on. There's no repeat services. Once they do it, it's one time, and then you have a chance for follow-on services, but there's no repeat experience. You get one great experience.
I also like this metric, which I would refer to as a net promoter score, because since this is in the innovator side of the adoption curve, there aren't many people who are actively searching for this solution, would be my assumption, which I think is a very strong assumption. A lot of their growth, as Sherry stated, is going to be word of mouth and people telling other people about it, because there needs to be an awareness and an education and understanding that this exists, because it's not necessarily something people are actively searching for right now.
That's true. You know what else people might not be searching for?
A 33-minute deal memo?
That's possible. They also might not be searching for the Upside podcast. But if they wanted to search for the Upside podcast, how would they do that, Jay?
Oh, this is actually one of my favorite deal memos that we've done. I think this was good. I think we really dug into things. So I hope they were searching for a 33-minute deal memo. So if they're not searching for the Upside podcast, or they are searching for the Upside podcast, they can find it on Twitter at UpsideFM or on Breaker under Upside. And you can comment on this episode. You can like this episode, which would be great. We would love for you to leave a rating or review on iTunes, where you can also find Upside. Let us know what you guys think. Let us know what we missed. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest. So shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time, talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
never mind. The road that can't be matched, I'm lighting it on fire. Used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way and get it.